Thank you for taking the time to join us for the webinar. Today we will have presenting Dr. Dima Nazzal. Dima is an associate professor with the Georgia Tech Center for Health and Humanitarian Logistics, as well as Director of Student Services for the Stewart School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at Georgia Tech. Also on the webinar we have Julie Swan, Aslam Aragun, and Pinar Keskinacek, co-directors and founders of the Center and instructors for our Health and Humanitarian Logistics Professional Education Series. Dr. Nazzal will be presenting an overview relating to the Health and Humanitarian Logistics Certificate Program. On the slide you can see the 3 courses that make up the series. The first course, Pre-Planning Strategy for Health and Humanitarian Organizations. The second course, Tactical Decision Making in Public Health and Humanitarian Response. And the third and final course, Systems Operations in Health and Humanitarian Response. These courses are taught on the Georgia Tech campus at our Global Learning Center in Atlanta, Georgia. For more information about the courses, you can visit www.scl.gatech.edu/HHL, or if you have additional questions relating to the program, please email webinar@scl.gatech.edu. With that, I will turn the webinar over to Dr. Nazzal.
All right. Thank you, Andy. Good morning, everybody. I'm guessing there are some good afternoons as well and good evenings based on your locations. Thank you for joining us today as I give an overview of the certificate program at the Center for Health and Humanitarian Logistics. As I'm going through the presentation, I might ask you some questions, or if you can feel free to ask any questions by typing in the chat box, and Andy will be able to capture them and communicate them to me at certain points in the presentation. I'll take in some questions or towards the end. So before I start with the certificate itself, let me tell you a little about the Center for Health and Humanitarian Logistics. Its mission is to improve health and humanitarian logistics and ultimately the human condition through better logistics. And the pillars of the center are education, outreach, research, and projects. Through education, which is what the certificate program falls under, we seek to increase the human resource capacity by training humanitarian logisticians for careers in NGOs, private industries, or donor agencies. Outreach, we seek to foster multi-organizational collaborations in order to improve the humanitarian logistics operations. And from research and applications, we seek to advance the science and technology to improve humanitarian logistics planning. These pillars are interconnected, so through projects with industry, we recognize certain research problems that we can, together with our graduate students, we can work on. But also we can create case studies through those, based on those projects that we can use in our courses through education. So let me start talking a little about the certificate program. And before I do that, first I'm going to define what humanitarian logistics mean. They are logistics activities that are related to preventing, reducing, preparing for, or responding to human suffering. It can be a disaster or it can be a long-term humanitarian issue. They span the disaster timeline from preparedness, response, recovery, and evaluation. And despite the similarity that they share with traditional business logistics operations, there are some key differences that make them more challenging. For example, the demand is highly unpredictable. We can argue also that in the business world, the demand is also highly unpredictable, but there's even more unpredictability in the demand in a humanitarian crisis. Furthermore, the supplies themselves are also unpredictable. The stakes are high, the resources are constrained. So there are certain characteristics of humanitarian supply chains that make them different from business supply chains. And therefore, these courses are geared towards the logistics issues within the context of the humanitarian systems. The key players in health and humanitarian logistics would be private industries, governments, military, non-governmental organizations, and others. And these are the decision makers where one party's decision impacts another party's decision. Now, if we examine the logistics activities along the disaster timeline, starting from needs assessment, and this is where we assess the risk factors, the vulnerable locations, the populations, and the types of logistics decisions here are what is needed, where is it needed, and how much is needed. The next stage is usually planning and mitigation, and this is related to pre-positioning resources and capacity building. Very important to consider the time scale and the granularity of these decisions. The next stage is usually resource mobilization. So in this case, if we look from a disaster point of view, the disaster has hit and or there is an immediate need. And this applies, the next stage would be resource mobilization. These resources can include financial resources, staff, equipment, supplies, and many others. On the procurement stage, there are some issues to consider on whether it's local, regional, or international trade-offs between procurement time and procurement cost and reliability. And for the transportation and distribution, there are issues that are different on whether the transportation is international versus in-country, last mile. Each one presents different challenges. So these courses will touch upon all those trade-offs and how these decisions can be made and what kind of models can be used in order to make these decisions in a more informed way based on the characteristics of the system in particular. Measurement and evaluation is also very important in order to understand the conflicts and the trade-offs. Throughout the disaster timeline, collaboration and coordination across agencies is very important, despite it being not as understated. It increases the efficiencies of the logistics activities and ultimately increase, of course, the number of lives that are saved. So this is as much teaching as I'm going to do today. This is not a webinar to teach you something, but more about what you expect to learn in those courses. All right, so these are the 3 courses that would lead to a certificate in health and humanitarian logistics. Andy already went over the timeline for them. So course 1 and course 2, those are the courses that will be offered together this year. If we look at the disaster timeline, those 2 courses, kind of course 1 is more organized on the planning stages, the mitigation and the planning and the forecasting, and therefore the topics in it are more of a strategic look at how to design supply chain systems for humanitarian sector. And the second course is more a zoomed-in look where we're looking at the tactical decision-making, how to allocate resources and procurement and inventory decisions. The third course is looks at across the humanitarian supply chain, the importance of strategic interactions and coordinations and collaborations. It's also heavy in guest lecturers that come from different sectors where they talk about how to establish a performance measurement system and the importance of system dynamics in the humanitarian sector. So next, I'm going to go over the topics in each course. But before that, let me tell you a little bit about what you expect to get out of these courses. Foundational knowledge. You will have new ideas, new insights, new tools, new models, and understanding of the trade-offs in the logistical decisions, the importance of variability, uncertainty, and how to deal with variability when making decisions. You will build skills to improve decision-making in preparedness, response, and system design. You will apply those skills to case studies and real-world problems to prepare for implementation in your organization. You will also benefit a lot from networking, where you can build some domain knowledge with other people from the health and humanitarian sector to see other points of view. So for example, this is a list of organizations of past participants. As you can see, they represent different key players, as I defined before. So you'll see people from NGOs or private industries or educational institutions, USAID, and so on. So this makes for very enriching discussions when we discuss case studies or certain topics, as well as post-class connections. All the courses are structured in the same way, where there is pre-class case readings, and those are usually activities in order to initiate your thinking. Once you've registered for the course, a certain time before the course starts, you will get access to certain cases, and those cases involve some reading and in order to initiate your thinking about the material that you will be exposed to. The in-class includes some lectures, computational exercises, and case studies and games built on those case studies, or some games associated with the computational exercises. The way that it works is that you learn some kind of a concept, you see some computational examples on that concept, you apply it to a case study, play a learning game, learn from each other, and then you try it on your own and repeat. So for each topic, this is kind of the way the topics are organized, so that you get exposed to the topic itself with some examples, and then you read a case study that puts the topic in a much larger realistic context, and then you try it on your own. And our courses are they span 2 days. Post-class activities, those include some assessments or exams, and they usually help in order to reinforce the concept, for you to revisit the class material and reinforce some of the concepts. Okay. I'm going to start with going a little deeper into the courses in terms of topics and what you expect to learn from each course. The first course is pre-planning strategy, and this is the course where we're looking at the planning stages and the designing of a supply chain system and the forecasting. So this is the purpose of this is to plan and to mitigate. The first large topic would be the distribution and network design. For this topic, you will learn how to model a transportation network, how to model the supplies and the demands, the flows between the locations, the capacities and the costs. How do you take all this information and build a network model based on those? What's the structure of such a model, how to build it, how to solve it, and how to interpret a solution. And as well, you will also learn a little bit about how to some enhanced modeling of complex issues, such as disruptions to the network or capacities on a certain road, and so on. Once the concepts have been learned and you know how to build a model, the next stage would be to go over a couple of case studies. And those are case studies that are based on projects that the center and partners from NGO have worked on together. One is with CARE and one is with the World Food Program. The CARE case study touches upon how to pre-position emergency items, so where and how much to pre-position, as well as procurement of where and which transportation mode and how much demand to fulfill. And both decisions are being made under uncertainty. The other case study is based on a project with the World Food Program, in which we simulate the port operations of East Africa, so that there are several ports that we create a simulation model of those ports, and also combined with a route optimization model. And the purpose is to try to satisfy the demand of the in-country warehouses based on the supplies that arrive to the port. The other big topic is forecasting. So forecasting, there are different, we forecast whenever there is some uncertainty or variability, and we have some historical data in order to, we can use in order to look into the future and anticipate the levels of demand and supplies. And that's another one of the unique features of humanitarian supply chains, is that you're not only forecasting the demand as in the commercial supply chains, but you're also trying to forecast the supplies, because there's a lot of variability and uncertainty associated with supplies. And this would be your first quiz now, or first question, which is if you can provide some examples of demand and supply items that we would want to forecast for in the humanitarian sector. If you have an answer, please type it in the chat box, and Andy will be able to view your answer, and we'll give you a couple of minutes to put in your answer.
Yeah, so if you could use that chat window. Again, the question was, please provide examples of demand and supply items that we would want to forecast. I don't see any takers yet. Here we have medical supplies.
Very good, yes. This is for the demand side and for the supplies.
Plastic sheeting, medicines, tents, staffing, water and food, also clothing and shelter, stoves, medical personnel, that's a good one, cleaning supplies. A lot of good answers.
Very good answers. That, I mean, it's getting us excited about having you guys in the courses.
Here, I think we'll see if anybody else has anything. Transportation out of a disaster area.
Mm-hmm. Very good answers. So those are very comprehensive, and they both touch upon the demand forecasts and the supplies forecasts. So food, water, tents, vaccines, all fall under the demand forecasts. Donations and personnel and equipment all fall under the supplies forecast. So for the forecasting, you would learn how to create a forecasting framework, the time frames, because there's different time frames for the forecast. Those are, there are the over the next few months versus more strategic forecasting. You will learn some forecasting methods, which are dependent on the trends of past demand or some other factors that are foreseen. Learn how to construct, how to estimate the forecasting errors and incorporate uncertainty. So these are basically the two topics, the high-level topics that are covered in the first course. If there are any questions on course 1, then please type them in the chat box. Any questions on course 1 in general, now would be a good time to write those questions. If there are any questions, then I'll move on to the next course. I'll give you a minute to ask any questions.
So again, if you have a question at this point in the presentation, if you could just type it in the chat window. It looks like we're okay. Okay, here I have one. The question is, what kind of tools will we learn from modeling transportation networks? Are these commercial or open source tools?
All right, so good question. For the transportation networks, you will use Excel. And in fact, we're going to ask you to bring in a laptop with Microsoft Excel and with a solver add-in in order to learn how to solve simple transportation network models, first how to build the model, but also how to solve it, how to find the optimal solution given certain constraints. And you would need Microsoft Excel for that.
Okay, I have another question. The question is, could you define the uncertainty term you have been using?
So variability and uncertainty, there are differences between the two. Variability most of the time refers to the natural variability in any system. So the weekly demand for an item that is usually stable, there is some variability around that, and that's just natural. Uncertainty is more of the result of the lack of information. So an uncertain event is something that you do not expect to happen, and that's usually the definition. Julie? Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to the second course. And the second course is the Tactical Decision-Making course. This is, again, as I said before, you're zooming in, we're zooming into the decision-making. We're looking more at the decisions that are on the tactical side. So, for example, the resource allocation, the procurement and inventory models, and transportation routing. In the first course, you would learn how to design a system, how to forecast for the demand and the supplies. And the second course is more on the tactical side. Some of the topics that you will learn in this course you'll be exposed to are inventory management and procurement. So what you expect to learn are some trade-offs and when dealing with conflicting objectives, and a variety of inventory models that one of the important things that you will learn is what inventory model works with what system. So some of the inventory models that you will learn are those that involve quantity discounts. So if a supplier gives a quantity discount, what would be the best order quantity? Or when the items are perishable, such as the case for many medical supplies. So you will learn several inventory models that are dependent on the type of product and the type of system. You will learn some trade-offs in managing inventory level, the trade-off between ordering too often versus not. And also when you have demand and lead time variability. So if the demand is highly variable, you expect to have a lot of safety stock, versus when the demand is not very variable, then it's less safety stock. As well as the same applies when we talk about lead time. If the lead time is large, if it takes months to get the supplies from overseas, then you will expect to bias towards higher safety stock levels, and so on. These are the types of intuitive concepts that you will learn, but you'll also see the math behind those intuitive concepts. Once those concepts have been explained with some simple examples, the next step again would be to apply this knowledge into a case study. And for this case study, it's the Big Depot hurricane planning case study, and also a learning game that is associated with it. Okay. The other topic within that second course would be the transportation and routing optimization. This topic, you will learn about the different transportation modes and how the different transportation modes have different cost structures. You will also learn about shipper collaborations and some routing optimization, some practical problems and solution approaches to routing optimization. So if you have a depot and multiple demand locations and a limited number of trucks with limited capacity, what's the best way, which demand locations should be assigned to which truck, and what's the best way to satisfy the demand of all those locations. So some simple solution approaches that can be used in order to solve these complex problems. Once the concepts have been explained, the next stage again would be to apply that knowledge into two case studies. The first case study is routing for Praxair, and the second one is malaria intervention supply chain. So the routing for Praxair involves forecasting some demand. So then some concepts from course 1 would be useful in that case. And after you forecast the demand, you plan delivery routes and schedules. For the malaria intervention supply chain, the decisions involve how to allocate the DDT spray teams given some predetermined distribution center locations and budget constraints, while also considering the operating costs, travel distances, resource constraints, and so on. So both those case studies will utilize your knowledge of the new knowledge on how to route optimization and forecasting.
I want to pause for a moment. We had a question. Do you include issues related to donated medications and other items in your course?
Let me just include it. Yes, absolutely. In many of the topics that are covered, we provide a lot of examples both from the health and from the humanitarian sector. Donated medications definitely increase the variability and the uncertainty in the supplies when we look at forecasting. So these kinds of topics are definitely hit upon during the courses. Good questions. Thank you. Any other questions before I move to the third course content?
Another question is, what software is going to be used in this part of the course besides Excel?
Mostly Microsoft Excel, because we want to send you back home with a lot of knowledge about Excel and all the different add-ins that you can add to Excel to enhance your decision-making capability, because Excel has a lot of underused add-ins and data analysis tools, such as the solver that I mentioned in the first course, which enables you to solve optimization problems if you have how to enter an objective function and constraints, decision variables. So this is a very useful tool, actually, the solver in Excel, and you will we expect you to become very familiar with it during the course. But that is probably the only tool that you would need. Even for forecasting, for building forecasting models, you can also use Excel for that. And for solving the case studies or doing exercises on your own, also Microsoft Excel would be used. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the third course. The third course in the series, and that is systems operations. This course hits upon very important, I'd like to call them emerging topics a little bit in supply chain, because they're not traditionally taught in logistics courses, but they are very important, and they span the disaster timeline. Those topics include the coordination and collaboration, the performance measurements, and some system dynamics. So the first topic is the collaboration and coordination. As you probably know, in any business, there are interactions between the company and its customers and its business partners, with its competitors and with its suppliers and many other entities in the market. And all those interactions play a central role in how a company makes its decisions. The same thing applies to the humanitarian sector. The decisions of one party or a competitor or a donor impact the decisions that another player in the humanitarian supply chain make. And in fact, if you ignore these interactions, some unexpected or undesirable outcomes might occur. So what you will learn with regards to that topic is what are the types of players and stakeholders in the humanitarian sector. What kind of behavior and games you would expect to see. Decentralized versus centralized decision making, the differences between those. Vertical versus horizontal collaborations. both for demand fulfillment and procurement, as well as inter- and intra-organizational collaboration. For example, the DHL and the Red Cross. This is an inter-organizational collaboration, and you will see some examples of those. On the case studies and games, you will be exposed to a case study by the based on a Pan American Health Organization's inter-organizational collaboration, in which they have some forecasts, they share their forecasts. You will learn about the process for sharing their forecasts with other organizations and the benefits of sharing these forecasts. Another case study and game within that topic is the Trace Info Cost Allocation game. And this is an electronic registration system for the Haiti camp residents. In that case study, you will conduct a cost-benefit analysis as well as how to equally allocate the cost of the system among the different camps, the cost of the registration system across the different camps. Okay, the other topic, which is still also dependent on, within the stakeholders and the collaboration, coordination big topic, is game theory. And basically, game theory is the study of decision making. It's what's mathematical modeling of conflicts and cooperation between rational decision makers. You will learn the elements of a game and static versus dynamic games. So static games do not change over time, while dynamic games are time dependent. And you will learn dominated strategies. These are the basics of game theory. And then you will apply this knowledge to a case study on the strategic behavior in refugee repatriation. So for example, in this case study, the players are the governments and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And you will look at some analysis of scenarios and actions by these two players on whether repatriate or not, or assist or not, these types of decisions. The other topics, and those are guest lecturer topics. So we have very distinguished guest lecturers from industry who will be talking about performance measurements and in the humanitarian supply chains. She will teach you how to design a performance measuring framework and vertical versus horizontal alignment of key performance indicators. We have another lecturer from academia who will be talking about system dynamics. System dynamics is it's a hot topic right now. It is an approach to understand complex systems, the behavior of complex systems. These are the systems where there are a lot of nonlinearities and feedback loops. And what you expect to learn in that topic, which spans probably half a day, is the system dynamic process, the feedback loops, the trade-offs. This is very useful for understanding how different things or different subsystems influence each other, and in order to analyze and compare assumptions of mental models. So this ends my overview of the 3 courses. This is a very high-level overview. The courses have other smaller topics that I didn't cover today. A lot of them are guest lecture dependent. So you will, for example, in this course, you will also have a guest lecture from warehousing experts that will talk about humanitarian warehouses and the design of such warehouses. So these things change from one year to another, but this is, I've given you an overview of the topics that you would expect to be exposed to for this year. And again, this is the timeline for the certificate. We have 3 courses. The first 2 courses are given together in 1 week, this May. And then the 3rd course is in September. Any other questions that you would like to ask at this stage? And I'm going to leave you with this slide, which is a picture of our recent graduates of the certificate with some quotes on what they thought of their experience in the professional education program.
Okay, I do have another question. The question is, are there any scholarships available?
Yes, certainly. Definitely there are scholarships. We can follow up with an email to the webinar attendees to send them the link to apply for a scholarship. Throughout our correspondence, we always send those links, but definitely we can follow up with an email today giving you the instructions on how to apply for a scholarship. And that's all.
Okay, and just if you do have any questions after the webinar, you can send an email to webinar, webinar at scl.gatech.edu, and I will include the link to the online application website or form that we have for those of you who would like to read over some of that information and submit something for review.
And I mean, for those who are considering applying for a scholarship, I encourage you to apply as soon as possible, because the registration deadline for the May courses is probably coming up soon, and you would need to fill out some forms to qualify for the scholarship. So definitely try to apply or send an interest email to us as soon as you can.
Okay, I have another question. The question is, would this program be appropriate for someone new to the industry? I am moving over from international development, but have some logistics experience.
I would say yes, definitely. I mean, your logistics experience would be also very enriching. It will make for enriching class discussions, but also you will learn some specific characteristics of the humanitarian sector. So yeah, I would say that definitely.
Since we don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and close the webinar with this last slide. If you want to learn more about the center, or if you want to get involved, please go to www.humanitarian.gatech.edu. The center has a Facebook page. If you just search Georgia Tech Humanitarian, you'll find that. There's also a LinkedIn group for the Center for Health and Humanitarian Logistics, Georgia Tech. The center is a unit of the Supply Chain and Logistics Institute. If you want to follow us, you can at GTSCL, and we also have a YouTube page at youtube.com/GTSCL, where you will find this archive as well as archives of our other free webinars. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us. Have a good afternoon.